Hi guys, and welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today, guys, today is a black day. Because today we must needs discuss my 5 most disappointing reads of 2020. Now, I don't really like trashing books. Like, I know that I can get worked up about things that bother me in books. I mean, watch my Akatar vlog or anything like that. But I don't like talking super negatively about the books I read. However, these, just as the name says, disappointed me. Now, this does not mean that I did not like these books or that they are bad books in any way. All of these except one I would not consider the worst books I read this year. Instead, they are disappointing because I expected something different going into them than what I got, which is why this is the most disappointing list and not the worst books I read in 2020. And I'll talk a little bit about what my expectation was going in and what I got and why it kind of landed there. Now, these are in really no order. I am going to put the worst book at number 1, but for the rest of them, they're not really in any particular order. There is an honorable mention that I didn't want to make it 6, so there's one that like almost makes it but doesn't, and we'll go ahead and get this started. So, let's get down to business. So, the honorable mention here is Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. Now, this is not a bad book at all. This book is fine. This book is actually, it's actually decent. Except that I expected something else, and I don't really know what I was expecting. I'm a big Django Wexler fan from his Shadow Campaign series, which is Flintlock fantasy at its finest, really. A great series about, it's kind of like the Napoleonic War with magic and demons, and I really enjoyed the Shadow Campaign series. And so with this book, I think I was just hoping for something similar, even though I knew it wasn't the Shadow Campaigns. So Ashes of the Sun is the first book in a new trilogy he is writing called the Burning Blade and Silvereye trilogy. In it, we follow the points of view of Gyre and Maya, who are siblings who were separated when they were young, and Maya is raised by the Empire, and Gyre kind of grows up on the rebel side. And this thing is even, Wexler has said this is very Star Wars kind of inspired, and the Imperials, or the Republic, whatever, they have called Haken, which are kind of like lightsabers, but they're like elements, so it's like flame blades, ice blades, wind blades, that kind of stuff, and that's kind of their power. And then there's these powers of the ghouls, which are more like alchemical, biotech based, and so they're on opposing sides, and things happen. Gyre is furious at the Empire for what happened when they were younger, and his sister was taken away, and he is, working with this little band of rebels to try and overthrow the Republic. And it's fine. I think I expected a lot more. It was like the Star Wars things are there. That doesn't really bother me, that it was very kind of Star Wars heavily inspired. It's just there was a lot there, and I didn't really think all of it really worked together. It went very fast in places where I thought it should slow down, and it went slow in places that I thought it should speed up. I didn't love the secondary characters. There's one character in particular that just embodies, remember, the danger makes me horny trope that I despise. That character is just, every time they're on the page, I just couldn't stand it. And so I finished it and it was good, and I'm still going to read the next one because I am interested to see where it goes. It ended in a place that I didn't think it was going to end. I thought the end was going somewhere different than it was. This happens to me a lot, where I think it happened in Rebecca. I thought the ending was going somewhere, and then it didn't go there, and then I didn't particularly like the new direction it was taking. So it was either going to be predictable or and that's really kind of how it was. But this book is good. This book is good. I enjoyed reading it. I never had any problems picking it up or anything like that. And I like Wexler's writing style. And I just the plot and the characters didn't really work for me. I am going to read the next one, and hopefully after some of this world building in this first one, I'll like it a little more. So, with my actual disappointing books, because that one was just I don't really know what I expected. But for these, I expected something completely different for all of these books. So, the first one is Boosh, the Burning God by R.F. Kuang, the third and concluding book of the Poppy War trilogy. If you've watched my videos, you know that I love the Poppy War and I love the Dragon Republic. 4.5 to 5 stars, both of them. I love how Kwong writes war and battle and just this intensity and like which side is the right side. I love military fantasy, those of you who have been following my channel for a while, and I just didn't get what I expected to get in this concluding chapter. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything because it is the third book, but interestingly, I was talking with Mara from Books Like Woe about this very thing, on why she really loves The Burning God, and it was my least favorite of the trilogy, and that is because if you read the Poppy War for the war, then I think The Burning God is disappointing. If you read the Poppy War because of Rin, then I think The Burning God is going to offer you what you want. I'm going to have a review of this soon where I discuss really all my problems in depth, but mostly it was literally every narrative choice that Kwong makes in this book is not the one that I would have made. Not the one I wanted to see. Like, the POV is always focused somewhere that I don't want to be at. Like, I feel like there's interesting things happening over here, and here we're looking over here, and I'm just like, please, can we pan this way and look at this stuff? A lot of stuff happens kind of off screen where I think it would have benefited, in my opinion, from us being able to see it. The pacing is all weird for me. Like, the last Part 3 of the book is super fast and should have been drawn out, while Part 2 is so drawn out. And really, what was the purpose? Like, I don't understand the choices that were made in it. I didn't really care. And so it was just so disappointing for me because of where the Dragon Republic left off, where, like, what else still had to be done. I was just so excited to follow it. And then it just to quote Eddie Izzard, slowly collapsed like a flan in the cupboard. And so it was fine. Like, I didn't hate The Burning God at all by any means, but I was definitely disappointed by it because my expectations were differently. And you're going to see that a lot here in the rest of this list. All right, the next book that is on my most disappointing is Tower of Fools by Andrzej Sapkowski. This was my first and only arc that I've gotten so far, that I've wanted to read so far, and I got it because I am a big fan of the Witcher video games, and I have read the first, I think, 2 novels and the short stories of The Witcher, and I have seen the television show. I'm a big Witcher fan. I think the video games are the best way to experience The Witcher. I think they're the most interesting and the best plotted and dialogued. Just, the video games are so great. Witcher 3, so good.
I slew it. It was a griffin, an arch-griffin, in fact.
In that case, I'm grateful. Arch-grateful.
So good. So, Tower of Fools is a historical fantasy about the Hussite War, which are these kind of proto-Protestants that are kind of rebelling and having these rebellions against the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is having these crusades against them, and it takes place in kind of Eastern Europe, Poland, and the Czech Republic. And it begins with this young kind of noble who is caught in flagrante delicto with a knight's wife, and then he runs, and really, I DNF'd it about a third of the way through, which is about 150 pages in, and he was still doing that same thing. Guys, this book was just boring. Like, I love history, and I love, like, I like books that are based on kind of religious wars and stuff like that, and I like The Witcher, but this book, it's so boring. It was so, nothing happened. I probably would have finished it and would not have DNF'd it if I did not have all these other books I needed to get to that month that I really did need to get to for various reasons, XXXX. But I just didn't have time, and I knew it was going to take me days longer than it should have to finish just because it was just so uninteresting. In addition, the arc I had was a digital copy, and I tend to read books much more slowly, electronically, than I do physically, so that was also contributing to it, and I just couldn't do it. And I knew it was historical based. I knew there was going to be a whole bunch of names, you know, that's always the case, and that's fine, but nothing really ever happened, and I kept waiting for something to kind of pull me in, and it just never happened, and I was so looking forward to it. So that I am the kind of person for whom Tower of Fools was written, and I just couldn't do it. If you have read Tower of Fools and you like it, please let me know. Does the series pick up after that first book? Like, what is it that you enjoyed about Tower of Fools? Because it was just, like, it wasn't bad, it was just boring, and it was certainly not what I thought it was going to be. All right, the next book on this list, please do not tar and feather me, but unfortunately, it must needs be All Systems Red, the first book of the Murderbot Diaries. Now, this is not a bad book, guys. Like, this is not a bad book. Slow your roll. Pump the brakes, boss. It's not a bad book. It's fine. However, if you have hung around BookTube at all, there is so much praise behind Murderbot. I have heard that Murderbot is like the Renaissance of science fiction books. Like, it alone has come to deliver us from evil. And everyone just says how good it is. Oh, it's amazing. I love Murderbot. Murderbot's the best thing. And I just didn't get it. Like, I expected way too much, and this is always the danger of being overhyped. Mistborn, The Final Empire was overhyped, and fortunately I did like that as much as people told me it was good. I'm concerned that when I read Joe Abercrombie, I'm gonna have the same problem because everyone's like, oh, you gotta read Joe Abercrombie. Murderbot is about Murderbots. That's slangily what the model of Murderbot is called. They're security bots, and they look like humans, but have guns built into their arms, so they protect like scientific groups, or they're just security bots. That's what they are. And this story with Murderbot, it's a novella, and this story with Murderbot follows, Murderbot is trying to protect this kind of scientific research group on this new planet, and and crisis happens, there's some other stuff, and people start dying, and Murderbot's gotta protect everybody. And that was fine. It was fine. This book is so short that there is not a lot that's explained. You're just kind of like in it for the ride, I guess. Nothing is super detailed or well drawn. None of the characters are particularly interesting other than Murderbot. And Murderbot, guys, come on, if you've read it, you know. Like, Murderbot, there are two things about Murderbot. One, Murderbot does not want to talk to anybody. Murderbot desires to be left alone. Murderbot is an introvert. And Murderbot also just wants to watch soap operas. Murderbot, he just wants to watch this soap opera, and he tells you over and over again that he really just would rather be watching these recorded episodes of the soap opera on his feed inside his like equipment while everyone else is doing anything. Like, he pretends to listen, but just wants to watch the soap opera, and that's it. Like, it's a one-trick pony. Like, it repeats it all over the place, and it's fine. This may be the most okay, the most fine science fiction book I've ever read. It was okay. Like, I expected so much. I don't know what I expected, but I expected so much more considering how much everyone praises Murderbot. Now, I've only read the first one, and it is a novella, which explains the lack of, you know, kind of like more well-drawn side characters and that kind of thing. I am going to read the other novellas at least. I don't know when, but I do plan to read the other novellas because it is interesting enough for me to continue, but I just didn't understand the hype. And if Murderbot is your favorite, I know Charmaine loves Murderbot, I know Melissa loves Murderbot, I know Katrina loves Murderbot, I know Corey loves Murderbot. Like, I know there are so many people who just love them some Murderbot, and that's fine. Like, that's fine. I do get how, especially if you're just like, yes, I also hate talking to people I don't know. I completely understand it. I completely get it. But the story just, there was the plot. I'm just like, what even happened in this book? So Murderbot's introversion and desire to watch the soap operas wasn't enough for me. Maybe everyone just loves it because they've read more than just this first one. But for me, I was just disappointed. I'm like, it's 3 stars at best for me. The next book on the most disappointing books of 2020, and I could not have wept more for this book, and that is Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. This is actually the most recent book I read. I was the co-host for the Shelf Space Book Club this month, or last month in December, and my pick was Promise of Blood, which I had been wanting to get to. It's the first book in the Powder Mage trilogy, and I expected so much of this book. And I tried to temper my expectations. I really did, because I've never heard anybody talk about how this is their favorite series and oh, it's amazing. I've just heard people be like, yeah, it's all right. But I still got my hopes up. Guys, this is a flintlock fantasy, which if you don't know, is fantasy where there is gunpowder. It's generally set around the time of like the early 1800s, like the Napoleonic War, French Revolution kind of era. And this is, according to all accounts, based on the French Revolution. The very first chapter starts with a coup against the king, and there are guillotines, so it's very, very French Revolution. And I was just drawn in. That from the first chapter, it was so good. I loved the first chapter, and I even loved the first few chapters, and then it just got away. This book was just... I have a review coming for this. If you watched the live show, if you read it, you know already all of my thoughts. If not, please look for the review coming. It's just unfocused. McClellan, it seems like he's trying to do too many things. The characters are not super well drawn. Things happen way too fast without explanation. It starts out with focus on this coup, which is so interesting in this kind of like pre-industrial era, with gunpowder, and these magic users who use gunpowder can like float bullets like a mile or bend them around corners. And there's also these other magic users called privilege that can use elements. That's not super well defined, but I wanted and thought that the focus was on the revolution and kind of navigating what happens after you depose a monarch. Like, how do you keep a country running when, you got rid of the guy running the country? And it started out that way, and it was so interesting. And then it kind of got away from that, and there was this secondary plot running about like gods walking among us, and it started dealing with like these ancient sorcerers and all this other stuff that was not any kind of way related to the coup and the revolution. And it was just unfocused, and I'm so disappointed by how good it could have been. Every scene I'm reading, I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be, I know where this is going to be awesome. And it was just like, what? What happened here? Why would, what? But this, none of that. I just kept hoping that it would change halfway through, and that someone else would have written the cool scenes so that I just wasn't sad about them. I didn't hate this book, but I certainly didn't love it. I'm not sure I even liked it all that much. It was just so much different than what I wanted it to be. The setting, however, is ingrained in my bones. You hear that, Sarah J. Maas? In my bones. The setting is it just appeals to something in my bone marrow. I am going to continue. This was his debut novel, so I do have a bit of sympathy in the fact that, like, it can only get better. Authors improve from their debut novel. I have heard that his second trilogy in this world is significantly better than this one. I've actually heard the short stories or novellas on his website that kind of bridge the gap between the novels are even better. So that does make me want to continue, because the stuff that was done well, I really loved. I don't think I've read a first chapter that I liked more this year than in Promise of Blood. And so it was just a mess. I was so frustrated. So Promise of Blood unfortunately takes it. I will be continuing with the series, probably not till April, but I definitely will be continuing with this series later. And now, my number one most disappointing book, and this is also the worst book that I read this year, so if you were here for a worst list, here you go. I gave this book 1 star because I don't like it. I don't like this book at all. This may be the only book that I disliked this book more than I disliked ACOTAR, and that is because I expected something completely different than what I got, and that is The Return of the Crimson Guard by Ian Esselmont. So this is a side story in the Malazan world. It is not part of the 10 Malazan Book of the Fallen. It takes place, I think, between books 6, The Bone Hunters, and book 7, Reaper's Gale. Either that or between book 7, Reaper's Gale, and book 8, Toll the Hounds. I forget. This book is 800 pages, and it took me 8 weeks to read. My spreadsheet says I read 12 pages a day of this book. It was so hard for me to get to. I know, Child of Honor loves this book. He and I have argued about it in my Discord already, and I know there are people who love this book. I did not. I hated this book. I did not like it at all. And the reason that I didn't like it, the reason it's disappointing is because you hear about the Crimson Guard. You hear about how awesome the Crimson Guard is in the Malison Book of the Fallen. Because I was doing a chronological read, so I didn't just read the first 10 and then start the Esselmont books. Instead, I read the Esselmont books where they're slotted in the timeline, so that stuff wasn't spoiled for me, and I'm kind of glad I did, because some big stuff happens in this book. But you hear about the Crimson Guard, and then they're just kind of like, eh. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess they're that awesome. I mean, they don't seem very awesome to me. They seem kind of lame. And so my exposure to the actual Crimson Guard was not a great one. The first 100 pages are kind of interesting. The main character's name is Kyle, which is bizarre when you're surrounded by like Urko Crust, or Cartheron Crust, or Greymane, or Shadow Throne, or Herb, Hellion, Skulldeath, and then you've got, hey, I'm Kyle. So that's weird, but the first 100 pages are fine. And then, guys, there are 500 pages of stuff that's just so boring. It's so, like, there is a siege of the city of, there's one of the cities is under siege. There's a siege, and y'all know, if you've watched my channel, I love sieges. I don't know how, I've never missed a board reading about a siege in my life. The siege of this city, I don't care. I don't care about the characters. It was just handled badly. Some of the dialogue, guys, there is a clash between like two titanic figures. And the dialogue back and forth, it's trying to be this really cool dialogue of like, you know, witty comment.
A little comment.
Like I'm gonna kill you, witty back and forth. Like, you know, banter. We've seen it, and if you've seen anime, read any RPG, or played any RPGs, it's what we're used to, right? But it's bad. It's like groan-worthy. There's one villain who, oh my gosh, one part where there are people trying to escape a castle, right? And there's an assassin chasing them, and the assassin is like hit with some kind of magic and is knocked over. The assassin almost has them and then is like knocked back by a sorcerer's blast, and then recovers and is like, where was I? Oh yes, killing you. And that guy, I'm not making that up. That's a direct quote. Where was I? Ah, yes, killing you. That's bad. Like, that's bad. Guys, that's JRPG territory, which is fine. Like, I played the JRPGs for the PS1 also, but that's that kind of dialogue. And so I realize this is Esselmont's second novel, so I do understand that Esselmont's books get better as they go. I really want to read his Path of Ascendancy about Kellenved and Dancer. But Crimson Guard, like the last 200 pages, it finally gets to a war that's brewing, and that stuff is interesting, and you finally start to give a crap about the characters. I know this character, Nate, is one of the only ones I can remember that I care about. And so the last 200 pages are quite good. Well, there's like 50 pages of wrap-up that's just like, what? But the 500 pages in the middle was just such a drag for me. There are momentous things that happen in this book, which is awesome, and normally I forgive that a lot. Most of my qualms that I have with the Malison books are forgiven by the awesome things that happen in them. So there are some like epic things that occur in this book, but by the time they happen, either the execution was just, I was just like, what? Who cares? Like, I just did not like this book at all. I am going to continue because, again, new author, he's going to get better. I have Stonewielder. I think I'm going to read it with Philip Chase later when he gets to it. So I am going to continue with the Esselmont books, but Crimson Guard did not do it for me. Hands down, the worst book I read this year. I actually have like a 45-minute like rant review about it that I filmed. I never put it up, but I did film it because I just did not enjoy that book, guys. I just didn't. Anyway, enough of the negativity, ladies and gentlemen. For the most part, 2020 was filled with amazing reads. I got back into fantasy this year. I got back really into reading pretty hardcore this year, and I could not be more pleased with some of the amazing books that I read. And even these, other than Crimson Guard, I didn't hate these books. These books were fine. I think I just expected something different than what I got. So if a book that you love, probably Burning God or Murderbot, is on this list, please forgive me, because it's not intended to insult you for liking it. I just expected one thing and got another. So, guys, what were some of your most disappointing reads of 2020? Let me know down there in the comments. As always, information about my Patreon and Discord is in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.